Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and fun fact about me, I am so generous. This year alone, I spent an entire $20 on charity. I know. Hold your applause, please. Well, it wasn't my money entirely. It was my friend's money, but it was my idea. So, obviously, I also kept some of the money they gave me. What can I say? I'm just doing what Jesus would have done. And Jesus' church is, in fact, on this earth today, donating other people's money to those in need, and then taking some of it for themselves as a treat. If you have friends or family that are Mormon, you have more than likely already been bombarded with images and videos of these big fat red machines with the church's name on them. Buy a cow, buy a book, buy a meal. Except you're not actually buying those things, you're buying a card that says those things on them and just hope that that's what you're getting. Except according to the fine print on the church's website, these cards are irrelevant and do not represent your donation. The church states, "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints covers all operational costs for the Light the World Giving Machine initiative. Individual credit card transaction fees are covered by the donor or the church. As such, participating nonprofit organizations receive 100% of every donation to purchase and deliver your selected items. Occasionally, it becomes necessary to make an item substitution to meet unexpected needs. When this occurs, replacement products or services remain in the same category as the original." This is legal jargon for they can use the money for whatever the hell they want. People will stand in front of these machines and agonize over what items to donate when it all goes into the same bucket anyways. And the church will divvy it out as they see fit, including to themselves. A charitable donation is a charitable donation, and the church still legally considers itself a charity. This is almost the exact wording on the tithing slips the church uses, which say, "Though reasonable efforts will be made globally to use donations as designated, all donations become the church's property and will be used at the church's sole discretion to further the church's overall mission." So even if you carefully selected the amount of tithing, fast offering, missionary fund, humanitarian aid that you would like to donate, the church can move it around to whatever category they want, otherwise known as the illusion of choice. And that is what they are doing with these vending machines. Not only is the church handling these donations expecting 100% trust from their donors with zero proof of said donation, they expect all of the charities they work with to do the exact opposite. On a completely different page of their website, because why bother giving a goddamn straight answer? The church says, "Participating nonprofits can use up to 10% of giving machine donations for overhead expenses, and each is required to submit a detailed report on how funds were used." It's interesting how the church micromanages exactly how the giving machine charities use these funds and also forces them to be transparent with their finances, when the Mormon church is about as transparent as black tar about theirs. And they don't let anyone tell them what they can or can't do with the money donated to them. The church has not released their financial reports since 1959. So we are left to speculate on what the church is actually making and what they're actually spending it on. The church reported that in the last 6 years since the giving machines have been operating, they have donated $22 million of other people's money to these charities. Something they could easily write a check for themselves, but instead beg others who may already be struggling financially so that they don't have to reach back into their own pockets. And like I previously stated, the church is already really good at coercing their members for money, despite their alleged $150 billion stockpile that they do not use unless paying out settlements in abuse lawsuits, building shopping malls, or being fined by the government. In February of this year, the SEC published a press release stating that the LDS Church was being fined $5 million for using shell companies to obscure the size of their investment portfolio. So the church was hiding money from the government, which is not only breaking a law, but definitely breaking a core tenet of their faith, which is to be honest in all of your dealings with your fellow man. I'm pretty sure that's a Temple Recommend question. But as much as the church loves to tout the fact that they follow the law regarding not reporting the SA of children, apparently that same rule does not apply to them when it comes to their money. So good to know where their priorities lie. This was not a little oopsie-doopsie, as the church had been knowingly hiding this money from the government for decades. According to the SEC press release, the SEC is SEC's order finds that from 1997 through 2019, Ensign Peak failed to file Forms 13F, the forms on which investment managers are required to disclose the value of certain securities they manage. According to the order, the church was concerned that disclosure of its portfolio, which by 2018 grew to approximately $32 billion, would lead to negative consequences. The SEC says that the church went to great lengths to hide this money and created 13 different shell companies. And this had all been approved by the first presidency since 1997. Basically, the church was afraid if the members found out how much money they had, they would stop giving them money. And they weren't wrong. This upset a lot of members, and the church's response to all of this is evil. And they treat their members like they are stupid. Like, members reading this should be absolutely insulted at the way they worded this. Their entire statement blames their legal counsel, which we know to be Curtin McConkie, and says that because the church senior leadership did not fill out those forms themselves, that they did nothing wrong. I am not joking. Even though Ensign Peak is owned and controlled by the church, and the prophets approved and signed off on everything, still wasn't their fault. Got it. You are under arrest for attempted robbery. But officer, I didn't rob anyone. I paid my friend to do that for me, and I sat in the getaway car, but I never entered the bank and I never took any money. Oh, okay. My bad. You are free to go. Here's how they answer a simple yes or no question. Question: did Ensign Peak fail to comply with SEC regulations? Answer: we reached resolution with the SEC. We affirm our commitment to comply with the law, regret mistakes made, and now consider this matter closed. That wasn't an answer. It was yes or no. So the answer is yes, they did fail to comply with the SEC. My question is, how can you both regret mistakes made, which is the most passively worded apology ever, and also have done nothing wrong? They're implying that Ensign Peak and their lawyers made this mistake and that the leaders were just in the dark about everything, when that is literally not the case. The word gaslighting was invented and perfected by the Mormon Church. The craziest part of this whole statement is the $32 billion that the church was found to have hid is not mentioned anywhere. That number, nowhere to be found in this entire statement. They still can't be honest with their members about how much money they have, even though it's like already out there in the public because of the SEC. Apologists for the church brushed this whole thing off, saying that this $5 million fine was a parking ticket in terms of both the level of immorality and the dollar amount in comparison to how much wealth the church has. I mean, I've never defrauded the government personally, but that's just me. And some people even started using the hashtag #MakeItATrillion because brain worms are on the rise and the church can never do any wrong. And Jesus needs $1 trillion, guys, so that he can keep buying himself fancy houses. Not for the needy or the poor, but for himself. Makes sense to me. The church is terrified not only of people finding out how much money they have, but how mismanaged it is. Ensign Peak Advisors is the investment division for the church, and you cannot know just how greedy the church is until you come to understand how Ensign Peak works. I'm not a financial advisor, but I do know how to read. And an Instagram account called The Bishop's Son really helped me with this, and I highly suggest going and following him and also reading that entire story highlight on Ensign Peak, but I'm going to summarize. So the church owns what's called an endowment fund, which is normal for nonprofits to have, and is a legal way for them to invest their money and then make an income from that. The church's endowment fund is managed by Ensign Peak. So every year, this fund makes approximately around 7% on return just by sitting there. They then use some of that money to run their organization, and then they reinvest the rest of it. So then they continuously accrue money year after year after year. And according to whistleblowers, the church's investment fund is anywhere between $100 to $150 billion. It is now nighttime because my battery keeps dying and I'm becoming homicidal, but I'm gonna finish this fucking video. Where were we?
Okay, but they don't have like $150 billion in cash. That's also including assets.
Guess which one of us does not know exactly how much cash versus assets they have? Neither of us. I would love to give you a full breakdown of the church's financials if they ever let anyone see them ever, but alas, Here we both are, speculating. So let's go ahead and use the low end of that number, 100 billion, meaning that the church makes $7 billion a year by doing absolutely nothing. Now, let's compare two other large endowment funds, which are the Harvard Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Fund. They are both worth about half of what Ensign Peak is said to be worth, at about $50 to $60 billion. And we know exactly how much these two foundations spent their money last year because they are normal nonprofits with nothing to hide. So we know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation paid out about 10% of their fund, or $7 billion, while the Harvard Fund paid out 4% of their fund, or $2.1 billion. So let's compare that to how much the whistleblowers say that Ensign Peak disperses out of its fund annually. $0. The average for nonprofits is about 3% minimum, and then they use the other 4% to reinvest back into the fund. And while the church does not release their financial reports, they do open their big dumb mouths to tell us that they spent $900 million in charity, or almost $1 billion. But if we consider the numbers we just talked about, that is less than 1% of their purported fund. Not only that, but $700 million of that $900 million comes from internal church welfare, or fast offerings, aka tithing. And this combats the number one thing people love to say when defending the amount of wealth the church has, which is, oh my gosh, but they do so much good. Look how much good they do. They gave $1 billion to people. That's so generous. No, other people gave almost $1 billion to people. And if only 200 million of that was from the church, that is negligible compared to what other people have given them. There are only 3 times we know of for sure that Ensign Peak has dispersed funds, which is $1.4 billion to build City Creek Mall, $600 million to bail out the church's for-profit insurance company, and $4 million to pay the SEC fine. The other $1 million came from like the church itself. Ensign Peak isn't necessarily like a debit card situation. And we haven't even gotten to the money that the church makes alone in tithing. The church takes in an estimate of $7 billion a year in tithing, and all of their expenses were covered with $6 billion, meaning the remaining $1 billion in surplus tithing is reinvested back into the fund. So they're making billions of dollars a year in pure profit, and none of it is actually going to help people. None of it. Because most of their purported donations to humanitarian aid comes from the generosity of the members themselves, not the church. Case in point, the giving machines. People are starving and literally ripping out their teeth to pay their tithing. Meanwhile, the church's investment fund is growing at an alarming rate for what? Exactly? The second coming? I didn't realize that when Jesus came back, he was going to put his face on the dollar bill and crown himself king with his trillions of dollars. Silly me for thinking money would not be a concept in heaven. Bishop's son on Instagram ends with this quote from the Book of Mormon. If you couldn't tell, it's one of my favorite accounts because it's both funny memes and educational content. Seriously, shout out to him. In the Book of Mormon, chapter 8, verse 7 and verse 39, it says, "For behold, ye do love money, and your substance, and your fine apparel, and the adorning of your churches, more than ye love the poor and the needy, the sick and the afflicted. Why do ye adorn yourselves with that which hath no life, and yet suffer the hungry and the needy, and the naked and the sick and the afflicted to pass by you and notice them not?" And then he says, if you're going to make up scripture, at least follow it. And that is chef's kiss. I'm gonna get that tatted. Let me repeat that. If you're going to make up scripture, at least follow it. Imagine someone who has been proven to be untrustworthy with money asking you to trust them with your money that they do not need. The church could buy these items from the giving machine thousands of times over. They could write multiple $22 million checks and completely change and save so many lives. And yet they beg people living paycheck to paycheck to do it for them so that the church can get the credit, maintain their tax exempt status, and take a cut for themselves because they're a charity too. The most useless charity in the world, but still. So besides money, why are they doing this? Well, according to someone who used to work for the church, the funds for this marketing campaign all come out of the missionary fund. Their goal with the Light the World campaign is to convert people to the Mormon church. It is not to help those in need. It's not to bring good tidings and great joy. It is to get more tithe payers in their ranks. It's an investment. Even though Jesus said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand does, the church is whipping out their charitable dick any chance they get because they love telling people every time they look in the direction of an impoverished person. But they are giving people breadcrumbs compared to the mountains of wealth they sit on for literally God knows what. And the church can do no wrong in their eyes and in their members' eyes. Anything they do is for the greater good. This hoarding of wealth, it's for a reason. And we're not going to know until the next life, which completely removes accountability. If the church had nothing to hide, they wouldn't be hiding it. And they have proven to be extremely self-serving when it comes to their money, and they have helped themselves. Hi, my camera died again, but I only had like 1 minute left of filming, so I'm gonna make this quick. The church has helped themselves way more than they've ever helped another person. And as a previous full tithe payer, I have given thousands of dollars to the church that I desperately needed at the time and I cannot get back. But they tell members that their temporal and eternal welfare is at risk if they do not give them this money. When really, all that's at risk is their big ass portfolio going down by a small percentage. Anyways, my advice is to not give money to the giving machines and instead give that money directly to the charities they are working with. And maybe do some follow-up, ask some questions. Did that person really get that chicken you bought? Where's the chicken? What's the chicken's name? Anyways, thanks for watching this video. Say goodbye to Trixie and Rexy. I will know if you don't, and I will show up at your house. I love you guys, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!